Welcome to Prison Professors. I'm really thrilled today to introduce you to Dr. Gerard Bryant, who has retired from the Bureau of Prisons as a psychologist and as an associate warden. We are going to learn today what we could be doing if we're going into the prison system to prepare ourselves for the best possible outcome, including what can we do to improve our status in the eyes of staff members, if anything. So I really thank you so much, Dr. Bryant, for taking your time to speak with us this morning. And I know that you're a busy man. Not only are you retired, but you're currently a professor at, I think it's the John Jay School of Criminal Justice. And I'd just love for you to tell our audience a little bit about your background and what inspired you to go into build your career with the prison system.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. It's a pleasure to be here this
Call
morning.
me Michael.
Michael, it's great. It's great to be here and be part of this process, because I think it's really important for particularly people who are incarcerated to get as much sort of motivation and inspiration, in themselves, because it's a long journey. And but I will start with just talking about my own journey. And I actually fell into working in the prisons totally by accident. And it's funny because the person we mentioned earlier that I said where you had been incarcerated at, it was a good friend of mine. And we worked on another job together. We worked at the NYPD. We were screening candidates, the New York Police Department, screening candidates. And she ended up going into the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And frankly, I saw an ad for it, and I thought it would be an interesting job. And not knowing she was in that field, she convinced me. She said, "You're going to really love this work. It's challenging, but you're really going to love it." So I started my journey in 1991 working at the United States Penitentiary at Lewisburg. I was a staff psychologist there. And the detention center in Brooklyn was coming online in 1992. And folks have to know this, but in the 90s, prisons were booming, and there were being prisons built almost every single day. I mean, literally. So I had an opportunity to get on the fast track, and I got to Brooklyn, and there were no inmates there yet. We were interviewing staff. And then I was asked to come back to Lewisburg at the penitentiary to be the chief there. And about a year and a half later, I became the regional psychology administrator for the Northeast, and I stayed in that job for about 17 years. And part of that job was administering the RDAP program. And then I ended up going, so my job in the Northeast was going to about 18, 19 federal prisons all across various states. And then I ended up becoming an associate warden at MDC Brooklyn as my last 2 years when I retired in 2014. Now I'm at John Jay College of Criminal Justice as an adjunct assistant professor in the psychology department and the director of counseling here at John Jay.
So that's an interesting career track. I was beginning my journey as a prisoner at the same time that you were beginning your career. And one of the interesting things that I like to point out to people who are going in today is what starts off when the laws and the policies that are in existence today aren't necessarily the same policies that are going to be in existence down the road. When
Right.
I started, and it sounds like when you started, there was no RDAP. There was no law that provided for this, that provided for the time off. There was no law that appropriated the funds for Bureau of Prison staff members to hire psychologists and specialists that administer the RDAP program. And a lot of people don't understand that we don't know what's going to happen 5 or 10 years down the road. So if you're going in there with a very long sentence, things can change.
Right.
And what I remember happening back in, I think it was like 1990, it was before the Clinton law that made RDAP possible.
Right.
It was 1990, there was talk about, there's going to be a drug program, and possibly Congress is going to authorize the Bureau of Prisons to give some time off. Can you tell us on your end how the staff responded to this change of giving an administrative change to RDAP? Because when it began, anybody who either had already completed the 500-hour course, even though there wasn't time off, or anybody who could go into it automatically got the time off, and then there were changes. Can you give us a little bit of the history of that, of how staff responded and how that policy actually changed in the Bureau of Prisons?
It's a great question, and it brings me back to the time when I started. So when I came into the Bureau of Prisons, the prisons had just recently renamed the program DAP. It was before called CAP, which stood for Chemical Abuse Program, which I thought was interesting. So so I came in before the VICLA, which is the law you spoke about, which Clinton, that changed the, which a lot of people associate with the 3 strikes, you're out law, but with that law came the law for the year off. But staffs, first of all, it was there were every institution was starting to get what they called DAP coordinators. But now when the law came into place, there was a scramble, because now you had to find staff, find drug treatment specialists. You went from programs that had 1 coordinator, maybe a drug treatment specialist, many times they were contract, to now saying, okay, we need to hire, and we need to hire fast, because we have to get this program. It's a congressional mandate, and we got to get this program up and running. Of course, there were a lot of raised eyebrows, right, from staff, because it's like, okay, we're going to give these guys a year off now? Come on, really? And you had other staff who were, particularly in programs, were realizing, because you were hard pressed to attract people for these kind of programs with little incentive. I mean, the incentive came from within, right? It was the intrinsic rewards that people had for completing something. But now there was also something tied. This is the only carrot that most offenders had, the only carrot they had to look forward to. So, it brought forth a lot of interest, but we had to have the staff in place first, and people to buy off and understand what these programs were about. And there was some resistance in some institutions about, should we have an RDAP here or not? And there were many wardens who wanted, who actually wanted this kind of program. At least that was my experience, because by that time I was in the region, because they just felt that they would get more staffing, and be able to actually have meaningful programs for inmates. And we know that when offenders are participating in programs, they actually make for better offenders, and there's usually less things for them to get into that are negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely my experience as well. If somebody is focused on building a better life for themselves, that gives them a reason to avoid some of the negativity that derails success for so many people in prison. And RDAP, of course, is the only program, and it's the only program that I ever knew that an individual had an opportunity to advance his release date through an administrative way.
Correct.
But the program has evolved and changed, where in the beginning, everybody got in, regardless if they had a 3-year sentence or whatever, they got a year, they were eligible to get a year off of their sentence. That eventually changed to becoming dependent upon how much time you had. And it also became how you could qualify to get into the program became different.
Right.
Could you walk us through a little bit about those changes with regard to what the benefits are besides the intrinsic motivation, what the benefits are for people who complete it depending upon their sentence lengths? It's my understanding that if you have 24 months, you don't get a year off. If you have 30 months, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you need to have at least 36 months remaining on your sentence to be eligible for the RDAP program, essentially. And the reason for that is there has to be enough of a window for you to complete the program and then be able to be eligible for the year off. So, the cutoff is varied. I know over the years they made it down, but the bar was, at least in the federal system, 36 months or less is when you had, or 36 months is when you had the time left on your sentence to be eligible for the program. And if you had something less than 24 months, you were not looked at as someone who was going to be viable, because there wasn't going to be enough time for you to complete the program and then get up to it. And the key words there, the Bureau is very keen on, up to a year off. It doesn't entitle you to the full year, but up to a year off.
Yes, and it's my understanding the policy has now changed so that if you have a 24-month sentence, you can only get, by policy now,
Mhm.
6 months off of your
Right.
sentence. If you, I think it's 30 months, you get 9 months off of your sentence. And then to get the full
Full
year to be eligible, you have to have 36 months or
is
longer.
right. Correct. That is
There
correct.
are also some changes with regard to how an individual qualifies for RDAP, what steps that person must take before going before applying to get into the program. Can you walk us through what qualifies somebody to be into the program?
Well, the bottom line is they have to have a documented substance abuse problem. And that substance abuse problem has to be documented within I believe it's a year within their instant offense. That might have changed too, and I would have to look at that. But that when I left, that was the bar. They had to at least have a documented substance abuse problem. Now, what does documented mean? That means that they have to prove or show that they've been in some kind of formal treatment, right? That would indicate that they admitted to and had a treatment program regimen. Or there could be other evidence, such as getting a DUI or other kinds of breaking law that would law breaking that involved some kind of substance, and there was some kind of official law enforcement document, police record that showed that this person had been on, some kind of substance at the time of their arrest.
Can you tell us a little bit about the influence of the pre-sentence investigation report on that qualifying as documentation when the probation officer speaks with the defendant and asks the defendant whether he or she has a substance abuse problem, and then the defendant self-reports that substance abuse or doesn't? Can you tell us a little bit about the influence of that pre-sentence investigation report on?
It's interesting because when this, and I talk about this to my students all the time, when this RDAP law came into place with the 3621E program came into place, a lot of lawyers were counseling. First of all, were not made aware of the RDAP program, right? They had no idea. And a lot of times they were counseling their defendants or their clients saying, don't tell the judge you have a substance abuse problem because you might get more time. It's going to work against you. But that actually works against them because this information did not make it into their well, at that time it's called PSIs, for the pre-sentence investigation, right? Now it's the PSRs, didn't make it in there. And if it wasn't in there, when this PSR was being reviewed at the institution, the clinicians would say, okay, so where's your drug history? Where's your substance abuse history? It's not in here. So to get back to your question, it's important to get that information in the pre-sentence report. So when that documentation is reviewed by RDAP staff at the institution and at the regional level, they see it. It's one of the proofs that there's a history and it's in here, right? Because that's an official government document that people are going to take as credible. It's not going to be a letter coming in from the outside from who knows whom, right? This is a official government document that states that you have a substance abuse problem. So it's important to get that information in that pre-sentence report and not be counseled by attorneys who want to shy away from that to quote unquote protect you when in fact they're doing you a disservice by not including it in the pre-sentence report.
And not only documenting the substance abuse history, but also, as you said earlier, documenting the time frame. So
Right.
you said earlier, and I believe that is still the policy, that the individual needs to show that they had a substance abuse problem within the past year.
Right.
So in that pre-sentence investigation report, you want to be, you don't want to sugarcoat it. You want to be totally open and talk about the amount, because just having, you spoke about alcoholism earlier, which does qualify somebody for RDAP, but it's my understanding that they have to meet some of the criteria in an objective test. I think it's the DSM-4. Maybe you could talk with us a little bit about that.
Right. They have to meet. That's the other. They have the other bar. They have to meet, and that's the DSM-5.
Okay.
That's the latest edition. DSM-5. They need to qualify. They had to meet the definition of a substance abuse disorder, and there's a bar for that. And so not only do they have to have a documented history, but they also have to be able to be diagnosed with using that diagnostic statistical manual as with having a substance abuse problem, whether it's with prescription drugs, opioids, alcohol, crack, meth, cocaine. They have to show a documented substance abuse program that's also diagnosable.
So what we need is a documented history, we need a timeline, and we need an accurate reporting. And it's really important to recognize it's not a cakewalk. Sometimes somebody's going to get into the Bureau of Prisons, and because of some of their previous bad decisions by not building the record, or some type of a record that can persuade somebody that you're not just getting into it to get the year off, you're going to be out of luck. Do you have any advice or guidance for somebody who makes the bad decisions early and not documenting the record, but wants to, demonstrate they do have a history of substance abuse while they're inside? Is there anything they can do to overcome that hurdle? Or have you seen anything that has worked to overcome that hurdle?
Well, if they can, it's hard once you're incarcerated. It's very difficult to go back and sort of recorrect the record, right? To edit the record, because it's, you can't go back into treatment. You can't do a lot of things because it's almost too late. But there is a period of time between perhaps when you're arrested and maybe even before you're sentenced, to then go to someone, and a clinician, for example, and meet with them, get evaluated, begin treatment, right? Start treatment prior to coming into the prison, so that at least that gets documented. There may be a chance it doesn't get into your PSR, but once you're there, you have an interview with the drug treatment staff and say, hey, by the way, I have an assessment that was done before, I couldn't get into my pre-sentence report, and I have a clinician out there, and can you contact him? He can show you, or she can show you that I have a documented substance abuse history with a diagnosis. So there is something you can do, but it's very difficult, Michael, once you're inside to kind of, recreate the record when you're there. But being honest with, at the time of sentencing, before sentencing, that you have a legitimate substance abuse issue, it's only going to benefit you. It really is. And it's going to help RDAP staff. You don't understand, a lot of RDAP staff are, I don't say suspicious or weary of people who come in later and say, oh yeah, by the way, I have a substance abuse issue. And they'll say, well, where does it say that? Where is that? Show it to me.
It's really important for people who are going into the prison system to recognize they are not alone. The staff members have encountered 1,000 people. They've heard 1,000 stories or 10,000 stories, and that is going to make people cynical. So if you can anticipate that, you should be thinking in terms of what's the best possible outcome? What can I do to document the record, to demonstrate that I have an authentic problem, to document that I qualify within the policy? And that's not always easy, which is one of the reasons that we would encourage somebody to work with a professional like Dr. Bryant, bring him onto the team, and help him evaluate where you stand. And is that something that you are able to offer to defendants who are going inside to say, hey, why don't you look at and make sure that you're okay before the person surrenders? Could you offer that type of service to people going inside?
Absolutely. And here's my thing is that if you have a problem in a substance abuse, you need help. And my job is to get people connected to those services. You're entitled to that service, right? If it's legit, if you're coming in saying with the story that, maybe I had a problem, I'm not sure. But if you're willing to get help and get assistance, and because a lot of people, use the word skeptical. A lot of staff are skeptical. They're only interested in getting the year off. But I look at it as if someone really has a problem, they want to be interested in tackling this issue and helping them get connected to that service, which is what they need. At least hopefully, because when they come out, they're going to have a better chance of not getting back in if their problems are addressed. So yeah, very much I see that and the professionals like myself who see that as being a benefit to the individuals long term.
I think it's important for defendants to listen and process what you've just said. is it's really, when you're going into the system, we've got to put our mindset into the minds of the stakeholders. What was the intent of Congress in passing RDAP? It was really based upon studies that showed people who were able to overcome their substance abuse history were less inclined to return to the criminal justice system and more inclined to begin building a career and building life as a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen. It's part of the whole process of preparing for sentencing, where if you can demonstrate that you've got a vision of how you want to come home, if you've got a plan in place, if it's believable and it's actionable, you're going to make it more inclined for every stakeholder to believe in you. And that would include the probation officer, the prosecutor, the judge, the administrators in the Bureau of Prisons, and the probation officers who are going to supervise your release on the other side. So the more you can document that record through sentencing narratives and biographies and action plans, the better off you're going to prepare yourself for the journey ahead. Speaking about the other side of the journey, Dr. Bryant, can you tell us a little bit about what an individual will experience who has completed RDAP and gets out? They've gotten there through the program, they've completed it satisfactorily, whether they got 6 months, 9 months, or a year off of their sentence, they go home, but it doesn't stop there. The treatment continues. Can you tell us a little bit about what they can expect if they go through the RDAP program?
Sure. Once you've successfully completed the program, there may be a window of time before you actually get released. So in that interim period, it will be suggested and probably mandated, well, although things can't be mandated, but strongly recommended to you to participate in something called non-RDAP. It's an outpatient program. So you can continue to meet with drug treatment staff at the institution and participate in ongoing groups or even individual treatment, right, before you get out. When you are released, you are going to want to participate and will be asked, well, more than asked, to participate in aftercare. And that means going to treatment, participating in drug treatment or going to AA, continuing the regimen of treatment. And I'm a firm believer that no one is a recovered alcoholic or substance abuse. They are recovering. You are always going to be in the state of recovering if you really believe in this program. Because there's no certificate that said, well, I was once a drug user and I'm graduated. This is an ongoing process. It's a disease. It has to be dealt with in that way. So aftercare is really important. So while you're at that halfway house, or if you're, at home or whatever, it behooves you to participate and be part of that program. And if you don't participate in that program, you will be deemed an RDAP failed, and you'll be returned back to the institution to complete your sentence. So there's the other incentive, that you don't want to be returned, right, back to the institution and be dubbed an RDAP fail. And I can tell you from my experience, particularly as an associate warden, walking through the special housing units and asking the individuals, so why are you back? I violated. I did not participate, or I tested positive while I was in the halfway house. Boom, back to prison. That's what happens.
And serving an additional year in many cases that they wouldn't have had to have served if they didn't satisfactorily complete it. People can also lose that year while they're in the program, or even after they've completed it in prison, if they have some disciplinary infractions. Can you tell us a little bit about how staff members enforce disciplinary infractions for people who have completed RDAP or are in RDAP?
Yeah, if you incur any type of infraction, discipline, and go and end up getting an incident report, you're basically going to be deemed an RDAP fail. And all the incentives and all the perks that you just got are literally taken from you, which goes back to a point I was going to make when you talked about the stakeholders and such, and what RDAP has shown about recidivism. One of the things that the Bureau of Prisons has done, it's called the Triad study. They were looking at inmates who left and the recidivism rates, and they saw that they were a little lower than what they were for non-RDAP participants. But one of the side benefits that came out of this study that showed that institutions that had RDAP programs had less incident reports, had less conduct problems from the RDAP participants. So what did it do? It made prisons, and these are the key words, the buzzwords, safe and secure. They led to orderly running of an institution. And those are buzzwords for administrators. So when they look at RDAP graduates, they see them as model positive influences in their institutions. So that's why these programs have actually spread, not only in RDAP, but now pro-value programs, trauma-based programs, because the research is showing that residential-based programs are actually making prisons safer, right? But get back to your other question. Yeah, if you have any type of violation in the prison, that is going to pretty much sort of detour your route to getting out a year or whatever, 6 months earlier, because the officials are going to frown down on the fact that you did not uphold, the tenet of the program is to be incident free, basically.
I'm glad that you brought up the other programs that are available in the Bureau of Prisons. As of today, it's true that RDAP is the only program that allows administrators to cut a time sentence by the law.
Right.
But that's not necessarily always going to be the case.
Correct.
So if you're going into prison today with a 10-year sentence or a 15-year sentence, you've got to be thinking in terms of, well, just as RDAP passed, I think it was in 1994, or that law passed in
1996, I think.
96, just as the law passed that allowed it to become a system that would incentivize people with time cuts, it's very possible that participation in some of these other programs can influence either the release date, the transfer to a halfway house, transfer to home confinement. All of this is part of building a record that supplements the pre-sentence investigation report known as the PSR. So I would encourage you to learn everything you can about the Bureau of Prisons before you go in, and don't only learn from people like us who've gone through prison. Bring people onto your team like Dr. Bryant, an individual who actually oversaw these types of programs. For example, I just mentioned halfway house and home confinement, Dr. Bryant. Could you give our audience a little bit of insight, perhaps, of what, if anything, they can do to influence their maximum release to a residential reentry center?
Right, which is the other word for halfway house. Okay, great. I take an example of a person I know who was formerly incarcerated for I know well over 20 years. Okay, and he came to one of my classes. I'll give you the end of his story. He came to one of my classes to explain his journey through the Bureau of Prisons. He stated to me that he participated in every known possible program that there was, from RDAP. Well, he wasn't eligible for the RDAP program because he was arrested for drugs, convicted of possession, but did not have a documented substance abuse history, and nor did he want to create one. But he participated in every other possible program there were, from culinary arts to vocational programs to everything. And he literally built a resume, if you will, of curriculum vitae with all of these certificates and programs that he did. And this was not to show some judge or probation. This was for himself, to keep busy while he was incarcerated, to better himself, to make himself just prepared for the outside. He said that he showed up when he got released into a reentry center. He got from an RRC. He met with his probation officer, brought his portfolio, if you will, and the probation officer, her eyes wide open, her mouth agape, said, "I've never ever seen somebody with so many, programs that they completed. It shows me you're the real deal. You're the real deal. You want to do something." So she started working with him and making sure he got a job and things that would help him while he was out. Well, fast forward now, he gets back into college. He starts going to take undergraduate classes, graduates from college. He gets accepted to law school. He graduates from law school. He is today a New York State barred attorney. 28 years, I believe, he spent in prison. And all of that time he spent was belonging and being involved with meaningful programs that were to help him. And that's what he did. So Your question is, how do you, what do you do when you're on you get busy. You work hard, right? You work hard. And luck doesn't just happen. Luck happens because you work hard. That's what happens.
There's nothing we can do to change the past. I know that everybody who is listening to any Prison Professors program is thinking back about what they wish they would have done differently in the past so that they wouldn't be in this situation. I distinctly remember when I was going through trial and looking over to my left and seeing the prosecutors who weren't much older than I was. I was 23, maybe the prosecutor was 33, and looking at that person and just saying, wow, that guy made decisions a lot better than I did. And, the reality is, it's never too early and it's never too late to start sowing seeds for a better outcome. I am so privileged to be able to share this message with people in prison. I consider it a duty and a responsibility, but I also hope that those of you who are listening or watching our program can actually see this evidence. I'm a guy who did 26 years in prison, but I'm talking to a distinguished law enforcement professional who's currently a professor teaching criminal justice students. And what I hope this shows you is real evidence that regardless of where you are today, you can change the way that the world sees you. You can change your role in society so that you can become a contributing member, an individual who is not really castigated or ostracized from society, but you can become a part of society. We all have something to offer. I think that you've just heard that from Dr. Bryant, who told us about an individual that served multiple decades in prison, but today is a lawyer. There's just a lot of stories. Unfortunately, people in prison only hear the negative. They hear that regardless of, they hear this story, you got nothing coming. They hear this story of, the only way to serve time in prison is to forget about the world outside. That's not been the case for people who succeed when they come out. Maybe you could tell us a little about, you gave us a story of successful outcome of prisons. Why don't you tell us about the other side, Dr. Bryant? What is the more readily available example? What happens to most people who go into the prison system, and what do they experience when they come home?
Well, I was just, before I get to that, just to stay on the positive for a second. Last week, Michael, I brought into my classroom 2 inmates I met while they were at Lewisburg. Okay, high security, the big house. Okay, right. They were both serving life sentences at Lewisburg. One was 18 years old, the other one was in his early 20s. They have been released. Okay, they got into law libraries and were able to work on their sentences and got them reduced, and they're out. And they're now both paralegals. Okay, 49 years of experience that was in prisons, standing before my class, talking about their experience positive. But those are the rare examples, right? These are the rare examples. The question you just asked me, unfortunately, that's more typical. And I talk about, and programs and people who are in substance abuse will relate to this. People, places, and things. The problems are the people return back to the same environment from whence they came, and the folks that are there are not there to help them. They're there to get them back in the same things that they were involved with before they came to prison. And then they get tempted, and then they get back into the same game, and that game is a losing game, and that game ends up getting back to prison. So that's more often not the case in reality. You're one of the few success stories. The people that you've surrounded yourself with are the few success stories. There are far greater folks who have come out of prison and have, unfortunately, and I'm sad to say, have returned because they just didn't follow a different path. They made the same decision, the same bad decision, the same choices that they made 20, 30 years ago, and they continue to make the same mistakes.
And that's not only a true statement for people convicted of violent crimes or gang members. Unfortunately, it's also true for white-collar offenders as well. A lot of times we can just look at the statistics, and if you're a data person, you can just look at the statistics and see how many people, once they've encountered the criminal justice system, there are a series of things that can derail prospects for success for individuals who don't take an active approach. And so my strongest recommendation to anybody who is going into the prison system is to surround yourself with a team of professionals that should include people like Dr. Bryant, who has overseen programs, who has interacted with tens of thousands of people in prison, who has an intimate knowledge of all of the policies and procedures in the Bureau of Prisons, and can help an individual understand the more we know before we go in, the more prepared we become to come out successfully. And we need that message, because once you get in, all of that access is kind of cut off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to arm yourself before you go in so that you can have the best possible experience. You can get out at the earliest possible time, and you can rebound and build a life of meaning and relevance and contribution. And that's what you can get by bringing on someone like Dr. Bryant to your team. Dr. Bryant, I really want to thank you for spending this time with us. I know that you're a busy man, and our episodes are limited to about 30 minutes, which we've already exceeded. But I'd like to give you the last word. And if you have any final words of wisdom that you might want to offer to people who are either in custody right now or on their way into prison, I think that I would love to listen to that wisdom from you.
Well, a couple of things come to mind. First of all, Michael, thank you for having me on this program. Much appreciated. Hope that I can make a return visit at some point. But I think this is very meaningful for folks who may be listening to this, who have lost hope, or think that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm here to tell you there is opportunities, and but you have to go into it. Have a plan for when before you go into prison. How are you going to use your time in there? You're going to have a lot of time, and a lot of time to do things. Start your day early. Get up before everybody else does. Go to the yard and, use the yard before anybody else is out there. So you don't have to have any beefs with anybody else. Get yourself into education programs, work, keep yourself busy, develop a routine, okay? But also make a plan for when you get out as well. All right. So not only while you're inside, but make a plan for when you get out, because that's going to be the hardest part, is making that transition. Whether you've been incarcerated for 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, it's going to be an adjustment to come out, and you need to be prepared for that. And as you said, use the help of professionals, use the help of mentors who are successful, who are role models, who have made it out there. Reach out to some of those people. Get to understand what some of their tricks of what they use to get out there and become successful, and surround yourself with people who are successful. Don't surround yourself with people who are going to just bring you back down and offer you something, a quick fix. I tell people there's no such thing as easy money, right? It may seem that way, but in the end of the day, there's a price to pay. Do things, organize yourself, and take action. That's the other thing. Take action. Changing your attitudes, but also taking action. Those are two important things to do.
That's exactly what we teach in our Straight A Guide program, and we thank you for validating that concept without even knowing about the program. Thank you very much, Dr. Bryant, for spending this time with Prison Professors. My name is Michael Santos, and on behalf of my two partners, Sean Hopwood and Justin Papern, we want to thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch with Dr. Bryant, please just visit our website at prisonprofessors.com. Justin Papern can connect you. His number is 818-424-2220. We look forward to bringing you another inspiring guest tomorrow. Thank you.